Hey friends, how's it going? Covey here with another video. Before we get started, a quick spoiler warning. This video will have spoilers for books 1, 2, and a bit of 3 of Infinity Train. If you have not watched the show yet, please go support the show on HBO Max. It's so incredible and special. Best watch without being spoiled, so please go watch it so we can get renewed for more seasons. Right now, the show is in jeopardy of being canceled, so go show your support. And just a little disclaimer, I'm planning to make Your Fav is Trans a series, and I just want to say that I'm just here to have fun. Don't take it too seriously, and if you disagree, then hey, leave a comment and let's continue the discussion in a civil way. Lake is a character I often see online that a lot of people view as trans and non-binary. And when I first watched book 2 of Infinity Train, I immediately identified with Lake's experiences as well. But why? What is it about Lake's story that makes her trans? Now, I will be using she, her pronouns for Lake in this video, though I know a lot of people have a headcanon that Lake uses they, them, or any pronouns, which I absolutely love and fully support. But I want to stick with what's used in the show for simplicity's sake, and it's important to remember that pronouns don't always equal gender. A person can be non-binary and still use traditionally binary or feminine pronouns. I'll be breaking this down in 3 parts. The Prime World, Mirror World binary as an allegory for the gender binary, Lake's journey in establishing her own identity separate from Tulip, and her fight for her own personhood. Part 1. The Prime World, Mirror World binary. Let's start where we first meet Lake. Season 1, Episode 7, The Chrome Car. To recap, the Chrome Car is a gateway to an alternate reality, the Mirror World, that exists adjacent to our own and interacts with us through the reflections we see on reflective surfaces in real life, aka the Prime World. Within the canon of the show, the Mirror World does connect to the real world outside of the Infinity Train, since at the end of Season 1, we see Tulip no longer has a reflection when she's back home. I'd like to spend some time exploring the mechanics of how this magic works and what it implies for the world of the show. Here's a question I have to ask. Do reflections have sentience before their prime enters the Chrome Car? I used to think that the Chrome Car itself could be the magical agent that gives reflections their sentience. The alternative to that, or at least what I thought, would be that all of us in the real world are just holding our own reflections as prisoners against their will. And, well, that'd be really dark, even for a show like this. But while rewatching, I noticed we do see Tulip refer to her reflection as a separate person.
If my reflection is a separate person...
And additionally, when she addresses Atticus and One-One's reflections, they are also separate people, whose personalities are significantly different than their prime counterparts. This implies that the reflections do live totally independently from their counterparts in the prime world. Maybe when a person's not near any reflective surfaces, their reflection is off in the mirror world doing their own thing. We also know that when a person sees their reflection has their own independent thoughts.
Whoa! You're alive? Oh no. I'm sorry about all the times I picked my nose in front of you. Not gonna lie, that was gross.
So if reflections have their own sentience and exist independently from their prime counterparts, then why would they continue to reflect their primes in mirrors? Well, I think the answer is that within the lore of the show, that's just how it is. If it's the only thing they've been told, why would they think to want anything else, or that anything else could even be possible? We see that with Atticus and One-One's reflections, they have no desire to stop being their prime's reflections, despite being completely independent and having different personalities. It's because of who Lake is that she wants to leave the mirror world and live a different life.
You can keep calling her Tulip because I'm not her, and I'm not living her life anymore. I don't have to do your stupid coding anymore. I don't have to eat your stupid onions anymore.
Here's the allegory I propose. The Prime World, Mirror World binary is a parallel to the gender binary. Now, I'm not trying to say that the Prime World is supposed to be the male gender and the Mirror World is female, but rather the way the show describes the relationship between the Prime World and the Mirror World is very similar to how our society views the rigidness of the gender binary. People will argue that there are only 2 options and that there is a clear physical distinction between the two, and someone can't determine for themselves where they're supposed to be because it's assigned to them. Lake, being unique, isn't content in her assigned role and asserts herself as different. Maybe at one point she was okay being Tulip's reflection, and she eventually grew out of it, and realized that's not what she wanted. Lake's determination of her identity is similar to the experiences of transgender people who are just different from their cisgender counterparts. Now, admittedly, Lake is also different than the other reflections we see here because she's the only one whose prime is a passenger and not a denizen of the train. We haven't seen in the show what would happen if another person were to enter the Chrome car and meet their reflection. So I have to ask, what do we think would happen? Honestly, I think it kind of depends, but for the most part, it would play out the way the train intended it to. I want to go more in depth into a theory I have about the purpose of the train itself in another video, but I do want to touch on the train's intent and impact in creating the Chrome car. For the sake of this analysis, let's assume that the train's purpose is to help passengers overcome their shortcomings and achieve some form of redemption from their past mistakes in order to be sent back home. The cars in the train are supposed to teach the passengers lessons, even though the lessons are somewhat random and don't always tailor to the exact issue the passenger needs to confront themselves with. But generally, these lessons are supposed to make the passenger a better person. However, we've also seen that the intent of the train doesn't always translate to impact. We see Tulip in real danger on multiple occasions, and in Book 3, we even see that the unintended impacts of the train itself can play a part in someone's eventual downfall. With this in mind, I assume the Chrome car's intent is to teach the passenger how to ask for help and get them to be a team player, which also happens to be one of the major shortcomings that Tulip has to overcome. I'm also going to assume that Tulip is not the first person to enter the Chrome car too, so I think the experience for those people who came before her would be what the train intended, getting help from their reflections to solve the puzzle, then their reflections go back to the mirror world. However, an unforeseen impact that enforcing this binary ends up having on the greater world of the show is that it punishes individuals like Lake who don't fit neatly within its rigid structure. Sound familiar? Reflections who are comfortable being reflections are just like cisgender people who are comfortable with their assigned gender. I feel like I can confidently say this is the outlook for most reflections because while we don't meet any other reflections of passengers, we do meet Mace and Sieve, who are implied to be former reflections of people who are now dead.
Once a prime dies, the flex make you choose if you want to have your memories erased and reflect a new prime, or keep your memories but become a fleck to protect and enforce the barrier. Choose to become a disgusting fleck like you. Coward.
What did you just say?
You're a coward. When your prime died, you chose to be a fleck because you were afraid to let go of your identity.
It wasn't about keeping my memories or identity. It was about respecting the balance our kind provides.
Ugh! Why are you like this? Was your last prime this much of a jerk, or is this pure you?
If Lake is coded as trans, then I feel like in the same way, Mace and Sieve are coded as cis, unquestionably comfortable in their assigned identities. And there doesn't need to be a big special reason for why Lake doesn't fit into this binary. It's because of who Lake is and says she is, the way she identifies herself and her assertion that makes her different from the other reflections. To me, this is similar to how transgender and non-binary people experience their gender, or at least how I tend to experience mine. It's not anything external that makes someone different, but it's their own feeling and asserting oneself that determines one's identity. If you think I'm stretching it here and think that there's a counter-argument based on, like, the physics of the mirror world or whatever, I also do want to point out that the show does kind of acknowledge the wonkiness of the mirror world lore and actually pokes fun at it.
Whoa, how does that work?
I don't know. It's like... I don't know. Do you know how every part of your body works? Like, why do your blood cells look like tiny inner tubes?
Because they're in a liquid and that's how they float?
They don't... Wait, is that true?
Yeah. Wait, isn't it?
Also, one last side note, I don't think it's a coincidence that it's the police that are enforcing the barrier between the Prime and Mirror World, and there is a history of police enforcing the gender binary by harassing trans people, but that's just a little cherry on top of this Allegory Sunday.
And if my last act is to bring you with me, Sliver, I can't imagine a better way to go.
Well, I can!
Part 2. Lake's separation from her identity as Tulip's reflection and formation of her own self. I'm going to diverge from the show a bit here, get a little personal, and talk about my own gender journey. I only bring it up because, like I mentioned, there were parts of Lake's story that I really identified with, and I want to draw some of those parallels. As a kid, I was kind of a tomboy. I didn't really like girly things, and I preferred to dress masculinely as well. Then, in late middle school and early high school, as my peers and I were all going through puberty, I saw how many of my friends embraced their femininity. I tried to do this as well, but honestly, I wasn't very good at it. I get that everyone around that age goes through an awkward stage, but I feel like mine lasted longer than normal and was a lot more uncomfortable. Eventually, I got the hang of behaving and performing as a girl in the world. It wasn't until years later in college that I realized I was trans and that the female persona that I had worked so hard to put together wasn't the real me. When I came out, I wanted to separate myself from what was essentially an alter ego of myself, but at the same time, I didn't quite know who I was either. When Lake first says she doesn't even have a name yet, it reminded me of the year I experienced doubting and questioning my identity, trying on different names like hats, and not really knowing who I was. I also changed the kind of clothes I wore, cut my hair short, and went by nicknames as I was discovering my identity. Lake's journey throughout book 2 reminded me of my own because she also doesn't quite know who she is yet. Just that she isn't what she's been told she's supposed to be her whole life. But it's through experimentation with her appearance, being around affirming people, and creating her own experiences that she discovers her true self-identity outside of being Tulip's reflection. By the end of the season, she's confident in her identity, which is completely independent from Tulip, and she finally has a name she's comfortable with, something I'm sure a lot of trans people can relate to. Speaking of, Lake also just has so many small, relatable trans moments. The way she says,
You can call me MT.
instead of saying, my name is MT. I also can't tell you the number of times I've had to be okay with getting misgendered for the sake of making a social interaction easier, especially if it's with people I'm probably never gonna see again. Getting asked way too many personal questions.
Do reflections go to the bathroom?
Okay, question time's over.
Getting ogled at by strangers.
Yeah, get it out of your system.
I mean, she's quantifiably, in a very real way, being discriminated against.
But you'll probably be paid less because Hollywood breeds gender inequality.
Plus, there's just so many memes about non-binary people naming themselves after inanimate objects.
I'm Lake.
Cool name.
Part 3. Lake's fight for personhood and to be seen as her authentic self. I think the most compelling argument to be made for why Lake's story is coded as trans and why it so deeply resonated with the trans community is particularly because her fight is for her personhood, as well as to be seen by others how she sees herself, her true authentic self. This is the very real struggle of trans people throughout history and as we navigate society today. I'm going to bring up one more personal story of mine, just so I can explain why a particular moment of the show resonated with me so deeply. That moment is this.
The train isn't gonna let you exit.
The train can't stop me from.
Did you ever wonder why that car was there? The mirrored car, the chrome car, whatever you want to call it. Your prime couldn't have gotten out of the car unless you switched. No one's prime could have. So, did the train make the car so you could get out?
You're trying to freak me out.
In this scene, we see Mace try to further torture Lake by essentially gaslighting her, making her doubt herself and her identity. He tries to argue his perspective, that Lake isn't meant to leave the train, and the binary roles of reflections and primes. Because supposedly, the alternative is that Lake's desire for personhood is absurd, and that because there's no one else like her, she's worth ridicule. When I first came out as trans, someone once asked me whether I was sure or if I was just deflecting some other ambiguous, unarticulated problem into a false identity. This would have been the simpler explanation, apparently. Much like how Mace tries to explain that the simpler alternative is that Lake is just always meant to be a reflection, with his weird, twisted logic. But here's the thing, the questions that Mace brings up in this scene, it doesn't actually matter why the chrome car was created. Lake is a person because she says she's a person. She's who she is because she says it. Stubborn as ever in her resolve and confident in her identity, She is determined to prove him wrong and sets off to get her own number. Trans people are unfortunately confronted with a society that consistently doubts, undermines, and humiliates anybody that doesn't fit neatly into this arbitrary binary. Tragically, not all trans people survive this, but hopefully we can all take inspiration from Lake's determination to survive and thrive in her own truth. Even though Lake is technically a non-human character, the fact that she's fighting for her personhood, her humanity, is what makes her story a trans story. Throughout history, trans people have always been fighting for the right to simply exist and be treated as themselves with dignity. But this is also true. As trans people, we don't need validation from anyone else. We aren't any of the number of things that people may call us.
I'm not foil. I'm not reflection. I'm not a sliver. I'm not a null. I'm not any of the hundreds of names that everyone wants to give me. I'm my own person who is getting off this train.
And that's where I was originally going to end this video, but since finishing writing this script, Owen Dennis, the creator of the show, more or less confirmed this to be true on Twitter, and the only reason he can't outright say it is because of people above him. C'est la vie. Hopefully 2021 is the year we'll finally get real trans representation in a cartoon. But anyway, this is just my interpretation, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. Are there any other reasons you think Lake is trans that I may have missed? And what are some other characters that you headcanon as trans that you'd like to see me talk about? Leave a comment and please like and subscribe for more in the future. You can also follow me on Twitter or Twitch. Thanks so much for watching. I love you and appreciate you. Stay safe and take care.